First thing, we have an action item. It's the, well, before I do that, I just want to remind you all that the CLRP meeting tonight from 6 to 8 at the Douglas Center, and I hope to see you all there. And I want to do a shout out to Parks and Rec because the pool birthday celebration on Friday was wonderful. Extra things for the kids to do, wonderful to see the pool full of happy people. And once again to Cindy and her staff, it was great. And there's another event this week, which will be the pickleball grand opening. It's this Thursday morning at 10. So lot going on. And now we have action items, but this was all action too. The approval of resolution 1064. This is a resolution to investigate the application for annexation AX 0423.
And again, this is simply step one. This starts the process. We'll come back at your meeting in August and ask for a public hearing to be set then for September for adoption of this. The parcel itself is actually a residential parcel that lies at the very end of Cliff Court and sits on the banks of the Ray's Mill Pond that is actually an Aberdeen recreation site, but this is on the Southern Pines side of that pond. It's actually the former home of former mayor Jane Clark. It is being resided in by someone else now, but they have asked for annexation. They are immediately contiguous. They already have town water, and they're simply seeking garbage and other services from the town.
So I need,
I don't know the answer to that question, and
question is, it's not us, so. I
yeah.
don't know that, did she live in that house then?
I don't know. I'm just asking for annexation of the property
So,
now.
moving right along, I'm guessing need a motion and approval so that the town can proceed with the investigating of the annexation.
I will move to approve Resolution 1064 for annexation application, AX 04-23.
Second. Sorry.
No, that's right. You second, and I'll say aye.
Aye, okay. And more comments from you.
Yeah, just real quickly, because I think the rest of the agenda kind of is self-explanatory. I will offer for anybody that is listening in on the stream, if for some reason we should arrive at 5:45, and I would only imagine that if we do, it's because we're in that closed session that is at the end of the agenda, the live stream will shut down because IT is going to switch over then for the 6 o'clock CLRP meeting because we will be live streaming that also. There is no intention of a request for any sort of action by the council after we go into closed session. So the only thing we will do is adjourn the meeting when we come out of that. But I just wanted to explain in advance. I don't think we get to 5:45, but if we do, the live stream will shut off. So with that, I can either turn it back over to you, Mayor, or ask Assistant Town Manager Mike Cameron to come forward on the first topic.
Thank you. The first one is solid waste and recycling. And the trash folks are up here. Oh, even more trash people. All the trash.
Well, good afternoon. It's always a pleasure to be here. Just a very brief recap.
Is your mic on?
He's just not on a mic, but he could have Paul's.
Just an FYI for those out there. Paul is
Just-
attending a church-related thing in New Orleans, so that's why he's there.
Just a brief recap. As you all know, back in January, we went outside and hired a consultant to help with our solid waste and recycling projects and eventually write an RFP, and that was Davenport Lawrence. And you have met David Horvail before, so David is here again. His partner in crime is Elizabeth Summerdike. Elizabeth, just a little bit of her background. She just recently retired from the city of Fayetteville as the internal auditor after 28 years. Happy retirement. I don't know that I would have jumped right into this, but we're glad you're here.
Well, we moved to your area. We moved
So-
to Seven Lakes West, so
she's-
we enjoy it here so far.
So she kind of keeps Dave and I straight on when we look at numbers and financial stuff. So anyway, past that, as you know, we went to bid, and I'm not gonna go really deep into the bid, but we've got a PowerPoint, and I will be honest with you, it's about 29 slides. Some of them we're gonna fly through, some of them we'll pay attention to pretty good. So we'll ask for some comments. Some of those comments we may ask you to hold until we get towards the end because some of it we probably will answer. The big thing is, and we'll hit this again at the end of the meeting, is we're at the point where we are on somewhat of a time crunch to make sure that we get what we needed in. So one of the things I will say, we have the 3 bids that were accepted by the town here in front of us. There are 2 bids, and here is the 3rd bid. You probably can tell the difference in bids. We'll talk about those later on. I'm not going to give the names away as yet, but that is 3 bids. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to David and let him start with the PowerPoint.
Before I even start the PowerPoint, first I want to thank staff and council. It's been a pleasure working through this process to this point. Absolutely awesome. Fire chief in the garbage business is kind of fun, okay? It's kind of cool, all right? You got to admit that.
Fire chief.
It burned it. I mean, it's really cool.
The fire chief is not complaining, but I'm not 100% sure that I agree with his comment.
But it has been fun.
Had a good time.
Before I even start this PowerPoint presentation, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on how this thing was put together, and before I even start, if I can. The information we're going to be looking at is comparing and contrasting bid information. It is not taking in consideration the current direct or indirect costs, such as your yard waste and the other indirect costs or direct costs like the containers and cart replacement and maintenance. So that's not in this process. We are only comparing and contrasting data, service levels, and dollar figures cost for these proposals. So when we say a total, it's total X, not Y, okay? So it does not include the yard waste, the containers, the 7 FTEs, and the 3 other vehicles that are out there. In the RFP proposals and in the submittals that we received, this is kind of a key piece as you go through your deliberation and your policymaking decision, we diverted probably 90% of the risk from the town back to the service provider. Okay, what do I mean by that? The landfill tonnage is in the fee schedule. The recycling processing fee is in the fee schedule. The CPI is either capped at a 4% or 5%, depending on what hauler you select. Before it wasn't capped, you actually had an 8% CPI one year. We capped it. There is no fuel adjustment. It's in the fee schedule. And the start date, to remember, as you look at these fees, is January 1st, 2025. So we're out a little bit. So all these fees, and your first CPI is not, I believe, October of 2025. In addition, you'll see some, I call financial sureties for your service level. We incorporated 29 service level agreements that we can bring up at any point in time. It means if they don't do X, they get a penalty of Y. If they miss a cart, miss certain things, they make a mess. 29 different services with a financial penalty. Plus, there is incorporated in the proposals a $2 million performance bond. Okay? My first slide, I'm supposed to do this here.
All right, Chair.
Ain't happening.
Technology.
I didn't do it, I swear.
It wants to be with BJ.
Yeah, it's possible it's too far away from How about this? There we go.
Hey, it works.
Awesome. I think,
He's got it.
you got it?
He's got it.
Yeah.
We'll give him
Battery
that.
might be low.
We'll give him the high sign.
Okay, so real fast, the RFP went out and we have a start date January 1st, 2025. So everything can be looking at $2025. Reviewed, the selection committee went through the process. So the selection committee is basically the staff and the Davenport Lawrence. Selection committee basically is to bring it forward to council policymakers. The preparation for insourcing yard waste is taking place. Yard waste and bulky. Your 3 units are on order. Your 7 FTEs, I think that's in process, and that is to commence, I believe, in October. But your contract is over with in December. So GFL is currently doing it. So December 31st, they're done. January 1st of 2024, you begin. But there'll be a transitional period of about 3 months. They'll have both people out there, which should be a good time. And you should see a significant amount of improvement in your service levels at that stuff.
And that's the end of 24, beginning of 25?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
End of 23. Yeah, yard waste, I'm sorry. Caught myself. So that transition is being placed. It's also, the arrangements are being transitioned to a new contract. That took place with the GFL extension. Next slide, please. So here's the kind of the timeline for RFP. April, we kicked it out the door. It was released. We had a mandatory pre-proposal meeting, which 6 potential service providers actually showed up. And out of those 6, we ended up with 3 actually providing submittals. The RFP was due on June 2nd. I don't need to read it to you, but then the service providers came in. And the key part of that entire presentation, why we brought the service providers in for presentation, wasn't not only to negotiate, but it was also to make sure they understood that the Rubicon system, which you all are purchasing for your collection system, will be integrated into their system. So what that means, if I can take a second, is you will see live, real-time data from the service provider collecting garbage and recycling. So you'll see real live, the threading of the people running around through your system, what's called Rubicon. It's the same thing with the Rubicon on yard waste and bulky. You'll see real-time data, which is really important to maintain the service levels. It's also very important to have that level of, I don't want to use a legal term, but evidence. When you go to find somebody $500, you have real evidence of why you need the service. Yes,
Is
sir.
that like the police department where you can look and see where every patrol car
Very,
is?
very similar, very similar. This will have some cameras on it, but it's very similar. It's all tied together. So yes, we can track what we're doing and probably provide better data. That was one of the things that we really pushed for these providers to have. The other thing on the presentations that I'll say that we also did, it wasn't just to talk about those things, but it was also we talked about whether Southern Pines is unique or not. We have a canopy of trees that is challenging for garbage trucks sometimes. We also have some power lines and those type things that are challenging sometimes, which I know y'all talk about. But we wanted to make sure anybody that put in a bid had a good understanding of what they were facing in Southern Pines. I'm not saying that we're different than anybody else, but there's some differences we want to make sure those bidders had some understanding of.
Great point, Chief. And if I can parlay onto that comment, that turned into, that presentation turned into a bidder substantially changing their bid service levels. So that was important, to the degree that they were not even going to accept utilizing Rubicon inside their system, that's typically true of most waste haulers. They don't want to have the information out there in the public eye, because they just don't. Having that into the other service providers, they agreed to it, which was a kind of a key piece.
That's actually a big deal.
Big deal.
You may talk to these guys and they may say, hey, this is proprietary. We don't want you to know what we're doing.
You did.
We had one that did say that.
They
It
literally
told us
said,
no.
no, the answer is no.
The answer is no, we're not doing that.
Okay,
So-
nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Is it not also the case, though, in addition to providing us with a lot of data, you use the police as an example, the body-worn camera in 99.9% of instances is actually beneficial to the officer, because if we go to find somebody, if we go to find the hauler for having missed, but it's in the system that garbage actually wasn't out when the truck came by, that's sort of their evidence that
There's-
we don't owe them a fine and the garbage wasn't missed because it wasn't out by 7 a.m., as a simple example.
Absolutely.
It is a two-way street, and I'll tell you that even recently, we had a discussion with a citizen about his garbage, and we went back and forth with them. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know whether you want to call it a stakeout or what, but we had to put somebody out there and say, hey, I need to know if this garbage is out. When the garbage truck gets there, garbage guy kept saying, it's not out, it's not out, it's not out. Well, guess what? He was swearing up and down it was out. Guess what? It wasn't out. So it's a two-way street. We feel like it'll benefit us more than some others.
So to clarify, we purchased the Rubicon software so that we can use it for our yard waste, and then they're trying to tie into it.
They're going to use your license, but they're going to provide their hardware, which basically is a phone, but it'll be your license that'll be integrated in their truck. Your property, your license, not theirs, and your ownership. That way it's your data.
That way, we can't be cut off.
That's right, you can't be cut off. And there's also SLAs.
Not that they would do that. I don't,
Well, they could, but there's SLAs. If they are cut off, there's a fine. And so, the next was just basically what your current service levels are in Southern Pines. You all are already aware of this. I just want to make sure that just kind of capture that information, which is effective July 1st, 2023, what your current service levels are. Next slide, please. As you all know, Waste Industries, GFL, is your current waste hauler. We got a one-year contract extension with them. They are good till December 31st of 2024. They pull out or will maintain. And then your yard waste goes away December 31st, 2023. And with your already in process, that's already transitioning over. Again, the vehicles are on order. They've left the chassis. They're actually getting the apparatuses put on now at the assembly line. You did purchase the existing bins and carts for $10,000 from GFL. I think it was July 1st, something like that in that area. And that includes, when we purchase all those, that includes the maintenance, the repair, and replacement of all those carts. So there is, again, a direct cost to that process. And you'll see that direct cost moving forward every year.
And just as a side note, all the carts that we purchased have already been distributed in town at request. So we've got another order that the town has purchased, should be here next week. Yes, sir.
This is part of the transition history.
It was, we had several people they were getting their garbage picked up, but they were using a personal can and they wanted to go to the can that town has, which is in most cases is actually bigger. But we went through those carts probably in the first 2 weeks. And so we've had another 300 on order that should be delivered next week.
Where are we using for storage?
Right now, what few we have, which are mostly the smaller recycle bins, are at the Public Works yard. When we get this new 300 carts in, they're going to the Eastman tank for storage. And there's storage and assembly involved with that. They don't come with wheels or lid on it, so we have to have the staff put the wheels on, the lids on, so
Will they have Southern Pines or any designation that they're out on
they
them?
do.
Next slide, please. Just kind of a historical contract cost that you've been through 21 to 23. You'll see there's a little decline in the blue, the fixed cost. It was basically $100,000 plus or minus in there because your processing fee was integrated into your fixed cost versus paying a tipping fee at the processing facility. Remember, you had $2.20 some odd cents, IB plus or minus in there, recycling fee per unit. You transition from that number, that expense, to a tipping fee of $140 per ton in 2023.
So in translation, you may recall that we were paying $1 per pickup for glass for a year, and then we ultimately, when we dropped glass, that fell off. So that's the $100,000.
Yep. Next slide, please. So after the RFP, these three companies did submit proposals for us to the town. And through the process, the Republic Services, they changed significantly and they did not meet the criteria that we established. So they basically are, I don't want to say we shelved them, but they're still there. It's that one. That's it. That was their entire submittal.
And we met with them. We've had multiple discussions with them. They're also the one that was not good with using Rubicon. They were proprietary. They wanted to use their, Republic Services.
The key with Republic also, besides not wanting to utilize the Rubicon system on their units, they also, because of the tree canopy, they wanted to go strictly what's called ASL, that arm truck. And we mentioned you may want to look at the routes. You may not be able to utilize that arm truck in downtown. And they said, well, we'll service minus 1,000 units, basically saying we're not going to do the entire city. We'll only do 5,500 units because we're going to pull out this other 1,000 units and let another service provider or the town get into the business. So we pretty well put them on the shelf.
No pun intended.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. The selection group committee is as follows. Next slide, please. We just discussed briefly the pros and cons of Republic Services. Again, a very highly financed large company. Again, I worked for them for about 5 years in the Midwest, out of Kentucky, Missouri, Illinois, Tennessee. Good company. It was a good company. They have a huge capacity. Their internal routing system, we did some checking on it. It's awesome for a proprietary system for them. I checked some friends of mine in Nashville, Tennessee. It's a good system, but for them, it's not for custom friendly.
We did ask the question when we had a meeting with them, instead of using Rubicon, could we be allowed to use their system? And
No.
it's still a no.
Not even read only, view only.
Yeah.
No. Well, okay, nice talking to you. So the cons as far as their RFP goes and the company itself is identified there that we had briefly discussed. Next slide, please.
That's pretty easy.
GFL, your current company, is, you'll already know, it is again, a large company, very familiar with them. They purchased Waste Industries several years ago. They are publicly traded. They're a Canadian company, highly financed, good company, no doubt about it. They know the area. It had limited transition for your contract. Like, they've got a consistent process pricing across the system. And they will participate with the Rubicon approach, which is surprising that GFL actually agreed to. I think that's because you have a local person here, and he knew what you wanted. They had some cons, like everybody else. They weren't that flexible and not a lot of change in service because they're very comfortable with what they're currently doing. They did not bid in what's called the subscription option, which we'll discuss here in a second, for recycling. Their customer service is not in Moore County. And it's small potato, but it is something that I think needs to be considered. They're going to utilize the existing dumpsters where another provider is going to put all new dumpsters out there, which is about $120,000, $130,000 worth of new cans. Not a big deal, but they want to utilize the existing cans, dumpsters that are out there. I just wanted to identify that. Next slide, please. Meridian is a smaller, privately held company, and I will take a second here. This company is their top leadership management group is what's called the group out of Advanced Disposal, which was the third largest garbage company in the country several years ago. They made lots of money. They're established this new company called Meridian Waste. They're in the acquisition mode. They are extremely well financed. They are a very seasoned management team. They are not currently in a municipality in North Carolina. They will establish a local office here. They're very flexible, aggressive in the bid process. They're just a very aggressive. I've been there before, looking to get into Missouri, for example. They're just hungry. They want to penetrate. Market penetration, that's what they're looking to do. The cons, they don't have the same capacity as a large corporation. And they, like, when they buy a container, a dumpster, they can't buy the same rate as a GFL. They just don't have the same leverage. Economies of scale. They're somewhat new to the market, meaning specifically Moore County, this specific area. They've got an operation in Raleigh that they're fairly good with. When I say that they're not in the residential, they're in the roll-off and dumpsters in Raleigh, but they're not into the residential accounts there.
But do they already have an office in Moore County, though?
They will put an office in
Oh,
here.
they're gonna put one
They
in.
will.
Okay.
They will.
That's part of the contract,
Yeah.
is if they get the contract, they will put an office in Moore County. I don't know, but I would expect Southern Pines.
In Southern Pines.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you can find a place.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem.
So I guess that gives a local place to call or report issues or whatever, but then if they don't have the capacity to fill if a truck broke down, what good is the local office?
They have the capacity if the truck breaks down, but they don't have the capacity like a GFL does. They can't say, if, let's say, for example, 5 trucks burn up in a fire at the warehouse, they've got a swag time. They're going to have a delay. I mean, that's just the truth. Can they meet the capacity over a period of time? Absolutely. I mean, they're out there now. They're servicing October 1st. They'll have 160,000 units in Jacksonville, Florida. So they have that capacity. And they did the reference checks, and I got all kinds of letters about this company. I really peeled the onion back on references with Meridian more than anybody else, because I know GFL and I know RSG. So I peeled them back quite a bit.
To date, Mike, how difficult has it been dealing with GFL without a local office? If there was an issue that you had to be like, what's going on with this? Are they responsive, even though they're not local?
As a whole, GFL is not a bad company to work with. We have had some ups and downs with them, to be honest with you, and it's really personnel driven. If they have one person out of place that we normally deal with,
That's it.
we struggle at that point. As a whole, I cannot say anything negative about GFL to work with them, to be honest with you. So, and even in the bid process, GFL held the line on some things. Meridian was much more flexible because Meridian as David said, they're very, very aggressive. They want to get in the market. They're planning on getting in the market. I think they also have a bid in right now for Holly Springs. So they are working North Carolina very diligently.
David, what does no exceptions on bid mean on the?
We had, in the RFP, the only company that had no exceptions to
Oh, everything we wanted.
everything we wanted. Everything we wanted, where everybody else had multiple.
There was an option, they priced it.
Yep. Yeah, their option, they priced it. This slide here may take a second or so. So let's walk through this one. Your current service is a weekly residential, what 75-25 is, 75% plus or minus a notch, if I can say that, have a rollout cart. 25% of your units are using the normal household garbage cans from Lowe's. You scale that over, there's the pricing for that service for those three companies. Meridian, and that's strictly garbage collection, is Meridian is the highest, GFL is a notch lower than. The next one, if I can, anytime, please stop me, that this is really important. And we actually will pull it down, yes ma'am.
And just so you know, RSG, that is reflective of 1,000 units
Yeah, 1,000 units.
reduction. So that is not the full scope of your residential pickup.
So in fact, we could just take RSG if you want to, just pull it all the way out. I won't even talk about that if you don't mind. This next one is interesting. This is where the weekly residential, to replace that 25% and add 1,700 brand new carts into your system. That way everybody gets a cart that doesn't have a cart right now, based on 75-25 split. Okay, and that is the number. No, GFL did not bid that, or Meridian did bid it, and day one, that value of 1,700 carts is the town property. So that's that one. So that 1.4 is to put an additional 1,700 carts out in the system. Okay? And any questions? That's just price of carts, and they do it over 5 years, and they put probably a buck per house. It gets to $60 for the cart, and that value of 1,700 times 60 is your town-owned carts at that point in time, day one.
Hey, did you say previously, I'm sorry,
Yep.
did you say previously the value of those carts is a little over $100,000?
Well, this one here, the 1,700, I forget, I think it is about 100 grand. You got to take 1,700 times your $60. And the other one, when you get down to 6,500, that's number 4, which we'll get to in a second, is a pretty hefty number.
It increased the aggregate cost $40,000, but it's $100,000 worth
Of carts. Yes, sir.
I just want to make sure I understood it. No.
No.
It's just a step up with the carts from.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes. Number 3, weekly recycling is as is, residential only is Republic no bid. As you can see the difference, that's your current system. Townwide is 573 or 565,000 for recycling, as is the current system with the 18-gallon bins.
You may want to mention the asterisk is all as is.
Yeah, the asterisk, the asterisks on the right-hand side of each one of those numbers is as is. Sorry.
That's your current service.
Current service.
So sorry.
Yep.
Go back to discussion. At 75-25, you never expect 100% of people to get the rolling carts. There will just be 25% roughly that just use
That's what it is now. Right now, we feel like
Even with the transition over the last month, it's still sort of tracking at that.
I would be leery of ever saying we get 100% of anything. I just don't know. Some people are just like, I'm using the trash can I got. I mean,
But to return to your last question about it's not aggregate or plus, the current contract is 1 + 3 under GFL.
Okay.
So it just, while you wouldn't add lines 1 and 2 out there under Meridian, you would add 1 and 3 under GFL.
Yes.
And alternately 1 and 3 under Meridian if you were sticking with the 18-gallon.
Number 4 is the biweekly, putting out 6,500 new carts for recycling. And that is taking it from the 490, probably actually bid on that because it's ASL. And also you see to the right side, with the carts biweekly is 468, no bid from GFL. So now you can add your 1 and 4 together for a recycling program with all brand new cards for all new, for every single unit out there. And those cards, that's $500,000 plus or minus a little bit. With the cards, it becomes the town's property day one. You're already in the cart business, but that's something to be aware of. Okay? Any questions on that?
Yeah, just, go ahead.
Yep. Yep.
No, I'm just trying to clarify the frequency of these numbers. Are these annual numbers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so it goes down by about 100,000, even though they collect it half as often, but we're getting the bigger bins.
Yes.
Okay.
Because it's all in the routing of biweekly versus weekly. You're running the truck once every other week versus weekly.
Okay.
And that's the maintenance cost.
Just quickly return to a previous question you tried on the point. Here where you see no bid means that if you were interested in doing every other week in a 95-gallon cart, GFL did not provide that option. So that would be an exception under that previous slide, that they provided the exception of if that's the service we want, they are not interested in providing.
Correct.
So
We asked that question face to face, and that, you,
That they're not interested in every other week in larger
Us too.
Let's do it.
us too,
So when they.
they're not.
When
We drilled that. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we drilled it. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
they said no bid on the carts, I mean, clearly people are gonna need a cart. Like, so they're just saying 100% of our buying the carts and getting them to all the residences on us. They will pick up what's at the street, but they're not gonna help facilitate it. Is that? Okay.
That's correct. The next one, number 5, is the same as you currently have out there with the small businesses. Same thing. Same with 6 is with the recycling with the small businesses, the 95-gallon carts. The biweekly would be the same system where GFL did not bid that. And you see where Meridian did bid that process. What that would entail, though, operationally, is putting more carts out on the street if you go biweekly on the small businesses, because there's going to be a substantial amount of recycling in the small businesses. So I'm not sure that is I wanted to put that out there as an option, but I'm not sure there's space capacities out there on a lot of these small businesses to have another 2 carts or another cart or so. But that is an option in the financials piece. The litter receptacles are there. Same service. That's you have, I think, 3132 that are weekly and 3132 that are twice a week. Any questions? There's more of the same information coming forward. These dollar figures, again, I'm repeating myself, are 2025 numbers and not a CPI attached it till October of 2025. Sir.
And the totals on the bottom reflect the current service, the annual current service you have today. That is none of the new options that are highlighted in yellow.
So that's line 1 plus line 3 in both cases.
Plus line 5, line 6,
Any-
line 8, and line 9.
Any place there's an asterisk is current service.
The small business below those lines, those are ones we 100% charge out. We don't, that's not part of the, okay, balancing.
You'll send this all to us after.
Today.
I would have loved to have seen something before tonight's meeting, but I understand
Well, in all
the
clarity-
amount of information is a lot.
I'll take the hit for that, but we chose not to be totally honest with you. And the reason is because it's a little bit complicated. It's a little bit complicated.
It is.
Not that you couldn't understand it. I don't mean that by any shape or form, but we wanted to make sure we walked through this and then said, hey, here it is. But it's sitting on my computer right now, ready to send to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we discussed that, and it was,
like the Cliff Notes, and then we can do.
yeah.
I told David that there's a note in there that says time is of the essence, but then there's no information.
Yeah,
Okay,
we realized that
Okay.
was
that's all right.
it is of the essence.
You're gonna send it afterwards,
Yep,
and that's all
you're
good.
getting it today.
Okay, thank you.
Different essence.
Next slide, please. So we within the RFP process, we came up with some fairly interesting, I think, really good options for the town to consider. And again, there's a lot of information to digest, absolutely. So one you'll see is no weekly recycling. That's an option. If you decide to say, our town, we don't want to recycle at all, we want the price strictly to pick up the trash as a utility, and that we have a price for that. Okay, we have a price, what's called biweekly recycling tiered system. And we'll talk about that again. No, let me stay, I want to stay on this. I'm going to stay here for this one. Let me just describe this one because this takes a minute. This tiered approach is this, and please stop me at any point in time if there's not perfect clarity, is, for an example, tiered is 10% of your system would be 650 units. 600, do I have a slide that identifies
You
this?
do.
Okay, let me
You do
show it
have
up.
a slide.
I know I do.
You-
I get excited about that one.
Just stay with the options.
Yeah, well, status quo, the current thing, and also the complete carting of your town, meaning everybody will have a cart for recycling, everybody, 99.9%, and a cart for trash collection. Next slide, please. So here is an interesting option one. No, key is no weekly residential recycling at all. It doesn't exist. We make it go away. Everything else stays the same. There's your price, 1.3, GFL is the low.
This is your current service
Current-
today, service level today, but no recycling.
No recycling, no carts, no nothing.
So the question is, Councilman Pate, really looking at you because I know you and I have had this discussion. This is an opportunity to talk about recycling as a whole if you choose to do so.
One of them, if you want. But we have provided in here, you're going to see some options that may be intriguing to you.
But generally, I find I have more recycling than I have regular trash.
Dumping fees are also twice as much for recycling as they are for trash.
True.
It's going to leave your house, just depends on
Yeah.
which truck, which can you put it in.
And that has become very true, but another point that I'm sure Dave is going to be making, and he said it to kick off this entire thing when he talked about moving some of the risk to the bidders, tipping fees are no longer a concern. Under none of these scenarios will we be paying tonnage, or is it tied to the Moore County landfill fees. It is on the haulers to determine where they wish to take it and to negotiate those numbers. So
We're not paying any tipping fees.
No.
It's a part of your fixed.
Part of the
cost.
fee.
part of the fixed
It's
cost.
fixed cost
Fixed
now,
cost.
whereas it was
Okay.
variable before.
Previous contracts called for, we used Moore County's numbers. We used Moore County's numbers. And we met with Moore County, by the way, on a couple of occasions, and we attempted to work through some of these issues, and finally, we didn't get where we wanted to be, I'll just put it like that, no need to dwell on that, but we just said, honestly, do we really care where it goes? I don't think the citizens do. I don't care where it goes. So we took those caveats out, let them decide where they take it to and what they want to do with it. We don't care.
I do have a question.
Get rid of the tipping fees.
If the companies, I know that there are families who've experienced their trash and recycling being picked up simultaneously and into the same truck. So if I know, right? So if the business is handling the tipping fees, they have an incentive to throw the recycling into the trash and it never gets recycled.
Two things, if I can. There's an SLA, if they do that, you're paying them. If they get caught through the Rubicon system, I put an SLA in there, you're $500 every time you do it, up to, I don't know what the high number is. At
Okay.
the second, third time, you're paying them. That's just a matter of,
Okay.
And that also hits the, any hauler that's doing that, you're over the ethical bounds. You need to.
Okay. I know that Rubicon is good. I like that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, go ahead.
So this is an option, and this is the lowest end, financially cheapest end for garbage collection as a system. This option one is no recycling, current system, no carts as is, pick up garbage once a week.
Before we get torn apart on this, the council is discussing no recycling. I want to verbally say the debate on how environmentally effective recycling actually is has been talked about. So if anyone's watching who hasn't seen that conversation, it is
We have some options coming.
debatable. Okay.
We have something.
Okay,
I
awesome.
do. But
Thank you.
before I even hit to that point, let me say this as far as, if I can. You've got about 6,000, give me a little bit of wiggle room because it's top of my head, 6,000 plus or minus tonnage of garbage. You have 1,000 tons annualized for recycling. And so that is kind of a little, nationally is a little off. You're not, you should be about, 30, 40% of your recycling versus the other side of MSW. So there's a reason behind it, and probably because, do you really want to recycle at $140 a ton? Not so much if you. But that's, we have some, but you don't need to be concerned about the processing fee with any of these options.
We also know that whatever we do as, if you were to pick this option, we know there's a tremendous amount of an educational process that has to go into that. Several of these, by the way, there's some educational. You've seen some of the stuff we've done already with a few changes. And in my opinion, we've been fairly successful with the stuff we've put out with our changes already. Well, thank you. But I think we know that if we make some of these changes, there's an educational process that goes along with it. Go ahead, David, I'm
Well, we
sorry.
had to educate people to recycle.
Yep.
And you had to educate them glass was part of the deal, then you had to educate them to say, oh, no glass. So, I mean, we have a
Yep.
group that I think they can learn.
Yeah, they do. They actually most of the folks we run into are very, very receptive.
Glass is part of this process. Glass is incorporated in your recycling stream in Sunoco. I confirmed that with Sunoco. I confirmed that with everybody. Next slide, please. It never really left it. I mean,
My friends can quit drinking boxed wine.
I do that for my wife. Doesn't know how much I have.
This can be the,
For clarification, because I know we had that conversation.
Yep.
It is included with Sunoco,
Yes, not Pratt.
not Pratt. So glass is included if Meridian is the selection with recycling.
Yes.
Not GFL, though.
I don't know where GFL is taking it yet. Right now, they are packing it up at their transfer station in Fayetteville and going to Sunoco right today. But it's their option.
Okay.
But they are going to Sunoco.
That'll be a clarification we will want to get depending on the direction all of this takes.
So I do know your recycling goes from here to Fayetteville transfer station to Sunoco, Raleigh. I do know that for sure. All right, thank you. Next slide. This one here, I'm going to take a second on this tiered recycling program. What is Harville talking about here is this. The example I will give you, if we were to take 650, correct me whenever I misspeak, please, 650 units that we guarantee, Meridian is the only one that bid on this, first of all. No one else bid on this. Where 650 units at $7.38, which is 4,400 and some change, and I've got that coming up, you guarantee Meridian 650 units, or $44,000 a year. The units, the residential units, will need to subscribe if they want to recycle, instead of paying for everybody. If 650, 1,000 units, 2,000 units want to recycle, Meridian will do it in what's called a tiered system. 650, 651 to 1,200, 1,200 to whatever that number is, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But this is important, that it's $7.38. I'm really, it's either 36, 38 cents. Each unit, residential unit, can say, I want to participate and get a free card at my house. I want to recycle every other week. Instead of paying for 6,500 units, those that want to participate can subscribe and have some skin in the game and put the aluminum cans and glass and paper and everything in that can, and it will be picked up in a brand new rollout can every other week. And how that looks is the town guarantees X per month. And that number, the first number is 4,400 and some change. Okay, and you have a revenue stream through that. If you have 380 people subscribe and they're paying the $7.38, now your delta is cut in half. That's the questions, please.
so in essence, if you want to recycle, it's an option, but you sign up and you pay for it. And if you don't, you just throw everything in the trash can.
Yep.
That's correct.
Have enough subscribers, we're covering the difference?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Right within each tier.
But it's tiered. It's
Yep.
tiered.
But then, because at the next number, they've got to run an extra route or an extra truck.
So that next person signs up and we're like, please don't, please
Then we
don't.
try to push to the top of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But right now, think about it like this. Right now, we're paying for everybody's
And
recycling.
not everyone's using it.
And there are
Sure.
a decent number of people that are not recycling,
Okay.
but we're paying for it.
And they are paying for it.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. It's not using it.
Yeah, it's being paid for.
And the number that Corey and I kind of looked at as a dry past survey, which means zero almost, but it, not bad, is that in the 30 percentile of participation. And that number actually makes sense in relationship to the tonnage. So there is a correlation between tonnage and participation. So I can't say it's, 38%, 32%, but I do know you're in the window there. You're under 50, guarantee that.
Something like 7 something a month if they
38.
want to do it, okay.
Yep.
And how often do they decide? Once and they're stuck forever? Do they subscribe annually?
In and out, you can in and out, but that's where the staff, that's the indirect cost.
Okay,
That's the indirect cost, that's staff, that's a fluid, dynamic process. You subscribe to cable TV, you get off of cable TV.
okay.
So they're paying that $7.38, and I really don't want to do this because I lost my job. I'll put the stuff in the garbage, whatever, that's a stressor on staff, but it is what it is.
Handled via the
It's
water
also
bill.
something that ultimately a council can set a policy around.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can say minimum of a 3-month subscription. Or
Yes, sir.
there are things you can do with the council.
Around.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Another slide that's going to answer this. But from these first 2 slides, if we want to do recycling at all, it's not GFL because they haven't bid on it so far.
They did not bid on it.
So they're continuing. So our status quo is not going to maintain with them because if we stayed with them at all, it's 0 recycling, period. Not even an option.
No.
Plan to continue.
As is.
The current service.
You
Doing-
won't pay
okay.
every other week, a 95-gallon cart.
But it would be like, everybody pays, okay.
There'd be a continuation. We would pay for everybody. There's bins. You're with GFL.
There would be zero change in what GFL's doing. If you chose the GFL, it would be, there would be no change. And we keep paying the way we're paying, as Reagan said.
So let me recap. Option 1 was the cheapest with no recycling at all. Option 2 is this recycling option is what's called their tiered system, which is a subscription and with a guaranteed number from the town. Next slide, please. Option 3 is as is, where is. Current system, which is the 75-25. Next slide, please. Option 4 is where we start containerizing all households to include the new 6,500 units for recycling, adding another 1,700 carts for residential, which takes the delta to 25 to 24%, and everything else is status quo. And the only one bid on this was Meridian. And this has, those carts is about $500,000 worth of assets, which become town property day one. And you already have a level of direct cost with the Public Works folks with maintaining the current carts and bins that are out there on the street, which is currently in your general fund.
Do we have data on the necessity of this? I mean, I know at my house, I've got carts from 2 vendors ago that GFL's happily picking up the other vendor's cart. And so do we know like how long the life cycle of a cart is, even if it's the wrong stamp on the side, they're going to still pick it up. So to know if it's worth signing up for this, because over time we're going to be spending the money anyway, or if this is like buying something brand new that we might not need brand new.
Depreciation factor is 10 years on a cart in the business. After 5 years, you own it. So that's not the depreciation
So
factor.
they never do pick up the previous carts. They didn't pick that up when I lived somewhere else.
They leave them on the street. It's just, they write them off. Yeah, they write them off. Yeah.
Pretty much anybody you have, if they come by there and your cart's out there, they're picking it up.
I mean, for-
Your carts will all be stamped, whatever direction policy you'll decide is stamped with town of Southern Pines.
Those that we are ordering, we're stamping the town logo and such, we're putting no company name or anything on there, so.
yeah, I've used the
I don't
recycling
believe
things.
Because we even gave the local number, I believe, for calls.
Yep.
Used the recycling things. I had so many to mix potting soil. I had several of those.
The bins are great for that kind of.
They are, they're great.
Going on the bins is a town phone number.
It's yours.
Turks.
Oh, Mike.
Oh, remember, I'll change my cell phone when I leave here.
Recycling options in a chart.
Next slide.
No, this is your graphics are great, by the way.
I'm not Miss Elizabeth.
Good job, because a lot of us are visual learners, so thank you.
So the very first one is no recycling as is on the garbage collection. GFL is the low end, as we discussed. I'm sorry, on the left-hand side there, the Meridian is the next one that only bid on the tiered recycling, which reflects, the little bit of cost, $54,000 versus the $496 on the last slide. Option 3, no service change at all, which is GFL. And Meridian is the one that only bid on to put the 8,200 carts out there for recycling and trash. Option 1, again, no recycling, no carts, no nothing, just as is, where is on the trash pickup. Option 2 is the tiered base system where you guarantee 650 units to be collected, or $44,000 a month. A year, $4,400 a month. The next one is your current service levels. And option 4 again is all new carts for recycling, and adding the 1,700 for trash. Any questions on this slide?
Just for verification, validation, and simplification, hopefully. Remember when we set that fee back at the retreat, it was based on a 50-50 split, but the costs that we calculated included our estimated cost for the yard waste effort. This slide, as I read it and with the footnotes, is entirely savings and/or subsidy based upon the contract bid. So this includes no yard waste or indirect costs whatsoever. So just keep that in mind versus our previous conversations about what we were going to charge on a monthly basis. They've done a nice job with the notes here, but I just want to make sure that we're all speaking the same language.
Yeah, thank you for that.
I feel like I'm hung up on the carts, but if we went with option 2, we're still going to be out some money supplying carts as people ask for them, but it's not like you automatically are going to get a brand new one. Because aren't we still obligated to supply them as needed?
The new carts, as the system evolves and increases, as your bandwidth gets bigger, Meridian puts the new cart out. Now, as that new cart goes out, you own it, you replace it, you maintain it. But if you go up to 1,300 carts, Meridian puts 1,300 carts out. You maintain it, you take ownership, it's stamped,
They buy it.
and
we
you own it.
maintain it.
You maintain it.
First one has not but enough that it will supply some demand for people that need carts.
You're talking about option 2 or 4?
2.
And your question is there space in there for up to 1,300? It's 6.
1,700 carts, but then also on the recycling, it was 6,500 new recycling carts because there are no 95-gallon carts out in the.
That's option 4.
That's four.
Four. Number 2 is the
is
tiered
tiered.
structure. If you have 650 units that would sign up.
That's the tiered.
That's the tiered. And out of that, when they do if you go to the tiered system, you'd have, say, 350 units to sign up, subscribe to the account, to recycle. Meridian Waste will put out 350 containers to those households. The day they put them out, next day you own them. If they start them on fire or whatever, the wheels get burnt, you own that cart to maintain it, replace it. It's also bi-weekly. And it's a brand new cart stamped with your logo, not stamped with Meridian or just stamped with GFL. You decide what carts you want, color.
So that's option 2.
Yeah, it's
Let's-
different. Yeah.
For clarification, if you don't mind, let's talk about option 4 again.
Sure.
I want to make sure that they understand. Talk about, walk through option 4 again.
Option 4, you currently have that 75-25 split. The 25 does not have, the 25% of your residential units do not have the 95-gallon carts. Meridian Waste would put the 1,700 units, carts out there to get that from 75 up to 99%. And they'd also put out 6,500 residential recycling carts, new, to the units. I mean, a total of 8,200 carts for a value of about $500,000. The day you put them out, the day they put them out, you own them, maintain them, replace them. And that's that number. And it's a 5-year contract, so that's what they did. They just depreciated it. Theirs over 5.
So tiered, if if you sign up, you get cards.
Yep.
Option 4, it gets us
Everybody.
from 75, we'll just call it 100.
Everybody gets a cart to recycle.
Card up so that it can be used by somebody else's land.
Is there any reason that we would go with option 4? I mean, I only see option 4 up there as a comparison. It is a comparison on 2 to 4. We go from just who use recycling to everyone, or we go from 3 to 4, which is no change versus larger bins.
Yep. Really, that's a policy decision because a lot of municipalities do have biweekly cart system-wide. It's an approach that a lot of people use. Carts, if you have a cart out there, you reduce your litter, it's a little more aesthetically pleasing, it's lidded, and there's a lot of benefits to the cart system if the community, the policymakers say, I want recycling community-wide. That's not a bad system versus the little 98 or 18-gallon bins. You own them.
I think, and correct me if I missed something, but to me, the decision point on 4 would be a decision that you wanted to move to every other week recycling in a 95-gallon roll container instead of the bins, in which case there's only one vendor offering that. But that, I mean, that's really the difference with 4, as best as I can tell.
It is. It is.
It would cost us a little bit more, but maybe it's better for the environment because they're not driving trucks every week.
Well, biweekly and recycling is the norm, actually.
Okay.
It's pretty well
Okay.
the norm across the system.
So it's strange that GFL wouldn't bid it.
Well, they know the system as is, where is. They've got 11 years, they know the system. It's very efficient for them. It's nothing negative to that. That's very efficient for them. They know how to work it.
But they're okay getting rid of recycling. Okay. It's strange to me.
Next slide, please. Just again, as the town manager said, this does not include the direct or indirect costs for yard waste or container maintenance and replacement. These are strictly the contractual RFP submittals that we're comparing to. So monthly would be $14.78, no recycling, as is on the garbage collection. The tiered recycling is, there's some options there. The $17.98, does that include the other,
It's the second tier,
the second tier?
but that's variable, so that's, you just have to know that $17.98 could change based on
The tier.
participation in the
Is there a
tiers.
slide on that?
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
yes. So that, again, that is something, on the tiered structure, it's very dynamic, kind of a little bit of fluidity to it. Just be aware of that.
So the tiered, option number 2, tiered recycling, not everybody's going to pay the $18, the $17.98. That's just for the people who do use recycling?
So the
No,
monthly
no,
rate and
no,
the
no.
annual,
No, because you have that incorporates the town's expense that has 1,200 units in there.
Okay, so even if 30% of people want to use the recycling still, and it's tiered,
Yep,
we still split the cost among everyone?
yes.
Okay.
No, 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 no,
Hey,
no.
That I think he's going to show on another slide.
Okay,
is
I'll
gonna be
wait until you get to that
Is going to be
slide.
on top of that, because if you look at it, it's $14.78 to do no recycling.
right.
So it's not going to drop to $10.98 to have limited recycling, if that makes,
Our slide will show this.
Okay, thank you. I'll wait.
In there if you don't have 100% of the tiered utilizing it. So it varies. No service change is the 22, and the new carts is the higher end. Got it. All right. Everything stays the same with whoever you select, weekly residential, the weekly collection of the rollout carts for small businesses, downtown litter dumpster service. What does change is the recycling option or the rollout containers. So those are some of your decision points that you all have to consider. The biweekly yard waste the town's currently doing to include the bulky, and we anticipate your service level should increase significantly later because you're going to see the cost for that because you're going to have 3 units out there with 6 FTEs engaged in that service. As we talked about at the very beginning, your tipping and tonnage fee is incorporated in the unit cost, no fuel surcharges in there, and your fixed consumer price index, CPI, is either 4 or 5%, depending on who you select. Next slide.
Dave, real quick, when you say fixed, that's a not to exceed.
Not to exceed.
So
not
if,
to
if
exceed.
that index comes in at 2.5, it's not going up 4 or 5, it's 2.5.
Yep, 2.5. It doesn't go, it's capped at 4 or 5% if it's Meridian or GFL. Recycling options that we kind of talked about this is, those are the options right across the system there is no change, as is. The 95-gallon carts out there, the subscription tiered based, and the recycling convenience sites is an option that we did not price out because that's acquisition of land, you man it. So we did not include that in our comparisons, or no recycling. Because typically what happens at the convenience sites, it becomes a dump site. It's just a convenient place, it's got a gate, it's locked, and you have bags at the gate, and that's just normal. Next slide, please. This is the slide we were talking about earlier that is on the tiered system, which kind of identifies this, where you go from the weekly recycling, that's the cost, as is, no change. The biweekly with the new carts, 95 gallons, 6,500, there's your dollar figure. And this biweekly tiered system can vary between 57,000 a year to 286,000. That 286 is at the 50% mark, and the 57,000 at 10%. So that is an expense that the city, the town would be burdened with a level of offsetting revenue to cover some of that, depending on how many people subscribe out of the 650. But that's that number.
So for those that opt in, are paying their full share, I think you can clarify that it's not we're subsidizing for everyone, even those who aren't doing it. We're trying to generate the revenue for that additional cost.
Yes, that's the bottom line. You're gonna have 650, and everybody else will be paying. If you have 300 units that are subscribing for it, the system is going to be burdened with 50% of that.
The only way we're really subsidizing a lot is if we're just over the threshold.
Yep.
Paying
Yep.
for-
Yep. Next slide, please.
It's 50% above the max you see with the.
Oh, yeah, if you get 50%, bless you. I mean, that'd be awesome. I mean, for
Places
recyclers.
that have done this opt in, it's pretty low. I mean, it's 1,500.
Yeah, if you can, right now, you're in the 30 percentile rate, and it's free. I mean, when it's free, you're not subscribing, it feels like it. I mean, you're paying for it, but, yeah. Yep. Want to walk through this one?
Go ahead.
Okay, here's the system. So this is tier 2, for an example.
20%.
20% of your system, 651 units to 1,300. Tier 2, once you hit 651, you go to tier 2. So you're going to be burdened with the full annual cost of 114,000.
No, 50.
Yes, and 50%, if you get 50% of participation rate, which was the 650, which would be the net burden, but you have 114,000 as your annual cost. I'm going to stop here for a second.
Okay, so what's the total number of households using recycling right now?
About 30 percentile.
So what number is that? Sorry. I'm just 30% of, what's the number of households? 6,500?
About 1,800 or so, 1,900.
Do you think people will understand all this? I mean, when you start talking about tiers and participation, and I'm just wondering
From the
if,
education standpoint,
Yeah.
at that point,
It's
what
gonna
people
have
need to understand is if I wish to put recycling at the curb and have it collected, it's gonna cost.
$7.38.
right.
I don't think, honestly, I don't think we get into all this. This is for you,
Oh, I know.
obviously.
But I'm
But
just trying
I
to
just feel like,
Think, how are they gonna,
the education process is, hey, we're doing a tiered system for this, and if you want to.
if you want it, you
It
have
doesn't
to
matter.
pay,
Yeah,
If you
you,
wanna recycle and you don't wanna have to drive to the nearest county convenience site.
pay us X
this is an
amount.
option.
Yes, okay.
And if you never recycle,
You're not
you're not paying for it.
Okay, David.
Paying for it before, but now you're not. Okay, yeah.
Risk of sounding dumb on this, I'm just going to try to clarify.
Yep,
So we have 1,800 households right now using recycling.
about 30%.
The tiered number of households is 651 to 1,300.
That's tier number 2, as an example.
Okay.
You have tier 1 is 0 to 650.
So let me,
And tier 3?
We do.
Oh, you think it's going to come down some? I guess I'm trying to figure out.
it's on the slide.
Slide.
Let me interject.
Now that you actually want to say, I wish to pay for recycling, the thought is.
It'll come down. Okay, thank
Let me
you.
interject on the tiers right quick. These tiers actually came from Meridian, and this slide probably explains it better than any. This based on their cost, what it takes, how many they need to pick up in a day. This is what they're basing that
So
on.
is-
They're saying essentially for every 651st unit, we're running an extra route or an extra truck or an extra crew. So there's a new set of fees.
Okay.
There's your monthly cost, there's your annual cost, and you can reduce that cost by participating in the subscription account from 0 to 650. The delta, the difference between your annual cost and the subscription is you can just take the annual savings between the biweekly or the weekly cards, the system over to the right, there's your delta of savings. Again, savings is relationship to recycling, not the system at large, yard waste and all everything else.
Okay.
And there's your 1,800 is in there someplace, let's say between the 1,301 and 1,950 at 30%. There's your monthly cost of 14,000, annual cost is 171 versus, and there's your savings versus the current system.
And we have our staff with the water
We,
kind of stuff.
To do this on a subscription basis.
Okay.
In our software.
Okay.
Obviously, details will have to be worked out, but we'll have some time to do that. But we do have the capability at least to do this.
Okay.
tell you so.
I got this memorized. It's a good thing you're going to send it to us, Mike.
Anything else on this slide? Next slide, please. You all, we've discussed this. You're in the process of bringing your yard waste in-house, and your bulky is taking place effective January 1st. You'll have it all together. Again, there's some direct and indirect costs associated with that, just as you all know. Next slide, please. Kind of just stair-stepping through. We extended the contract with GFL, did the RFP. Your original RFP was rejected. You only had one person, one submittal. Again, the contract was extended with GFL to December 31st of 2024. This one will start January 1st, 2025.
And
That's really it.
David, can you remind me what the original bid to keep service as is, was it $44 a month?
With the RFP that only had one, I don't have that number.
I think it was
It was in the
$44. I think it was $44 a month.
Okay.
I didn't bring that with me, but I feel fairly certain that's what it
I
was.
was like, I think it sounds familiar.
The original one included yard waste.
Yep, with yard waste, everything as
It
is.
was
Okay.
everything as is.
Okay.
That sounds about right.
So the RFP produced some pretty good results, I believe. Several options for the council to vet through.
And
Any
then,
questions on that?
yeah, so of that $44, it was like a $10 a month for the yard waste, right? That GFL was in that bid? I can pull it all up. It's just gonna take me time.
43, yeah.
Okay. 10 something
Then the tonnage on it, but
plus tonnage.
contract, yeah.
Okay. And then the prices we're looking at now are in the, what were the ranges?
Go back.
2 or 3 slides, 4 slides?
Keep going. Keep going.
Right there, right there, right there, right there. And number two is kind of a little dynamic there because of the tiered structure.
Would be the closest.
What we have.
Originally minus the yard waste.
All right, that's all I need. Thank you.
I guess one question I had looking at this may be a wrong analysis, but I'm thinking, okay, if we do option 2, it's basically, in my head, I'm like, it should net out because in a perfect world, if we hit that number 100%, however, the number you're showing here is GFL. So it's not exactly, oh, we're going to break even option 1 because the option 1 for Meridian was a lot high, was 200,000 higher.
Well, the option 2 is actually Meridian because they're the only one.
Yeah, so I'm saying if we offer option 2 and you pay for your service, we're still paying $200,000 more for recycling because the option 1 for GFL was 200,000 cheaper. So we need to factor that in.
Oh.
We're basically having to pay 200,000 more for the option of the option.
You're paying 200,000 more minus
Yes,
subscription.
we got the delta.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So,
Yeah, your risk is up to 200,000.
but we've got off the top a $200,000 buy-in to have that option because if we don't want recycling, we'll go with GFL because theirs was by
So I
far
think
cheaper.
that 200,000 is offset by subscriptions. So
It,
No, I think he's comparing.
no, because
the
that
waste
number
service.
is GFL's. The Meridian number is a lot higher.
oh, okay, okay.
So we're paying more for recycling than just subscribing in if we go with Meridian option 2.
The option 1 was 1.3 million.
Recycling, well, you're not paying for any recycling under A.
Yes, but that A number is 1.3 million. The Meridian A was 1.5.
Right.
And so the only one offering option 2 is Meridian. So I don't know. Yeah.
Do you want me to go back to option 1 and 2 and review that again, sir?
Because that chart showed the cheapest of the two. Like each of those tiers showed us the cheapest one. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I think once you send that to us and we can kind
Yeah,
of
it really-
gnaw at it and look
If
at
you're
it.
looking to just continue with exactly what you're doing, or completely getting rid of recycling, it's GFL. If you want to look at tiered or every other week recycling or any changes to the service, it's Meridian. And then there's just variations of what that costs or saves depending upon those policy decisions. Might be an oversimplification, but I
Real
think I
simple.
was correct in that.
I do think it's nice to give people the option to recycle or not. I didn't realize that only 30% of people recycled.
Those numbers.
Everybody I know does it. I
Those
guess I'm the
numbers took a
30%.
nosedive After glass disappeared.
Glass disappeared.
Yeah, and that.
But if we-
tonnage did take a nosedive.
But if we
That's
pick
the
up
biggest
glass
cycle.
again,
And that would put glass back in, and it would be
I think your numbers
88.56 a
would go up.
year, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
Is it 88.56 a year to opt in to recycle
738
a
times
month?
12.
Yeah,
738
that's
times 12.
88.56 a year, and it includes recycling glass again.
Yep, bi-weekly with a card.
glass again, people are gonna sign up for this again.
And to be fair, it assumes glass.
Is included as long as there is a Sunoco or a location that will accept glass. I
Value
mean, that's
glass,
something the
right,
contractor
which is-
can't
right.
necessarily. Yeah, exactly. But if for some reason they just stopped
So
altogether.
it's conceivable, we could say you're gonna pay 88.56 a year, and then Sunoco would back out on glass, and we'd have to say, oops, you're still paying 88.56 a year with no glass. It's conceivable based on just the market and the,
Obviously, that is conceivable, and I don't think
Okay.
every one of these folks we talked to, even when we had 6 people in the room,
right.
they don't have any better idea than we do about what the
Right.
market's gonna do. They are in it every day and they can,
Sort of depends on the world.
it does.
But I think if you add glass to the recycling factor again, that people will jump back into it and they will pay. Because I think they realize there are a lot of people still recycling and they go to Hillcrest. But I found out you can go to Food Line. There's a recycling glass place there too. I found that out last week. But I think people are, did you know that? No. Jim Webb showed that to me. Anyway, but I think if you offer glass again, people are gonna sign up strong again. because I think that just, everybody was just kind of deflated when we took away glass. We were the only ones that did it, because other municipalities didn't do that. So we took that away, not us, but, you know, the world took it away. I think the tier, we're gonna get more than 30% again.
You doubt it?
David, is
I
there,
think what people have to pay,
You
I don't
they
think
will?
it's going to go up.
at what point do we do an in-house bid to compare what it would cost us to do our own trash?
We haven't done that. We did it partially already. You have that in the original presentation. Then we had a couple blocks, a couple walls. We talked about the fleet maintenance arena, which you really don't have a facility to do that. Then your tonnage would be going to the Moore County Transfer Station, not being internalized. So you're almost out of the bandwidth within reason financially to try to do it in-house. You may be in 5 years when that changes a little bit. All three of the people that bid on this, to include Republic, Meridian, and GFL, all are going to internalize their waste at their landfill. And that's where they pick up a large part of their margin. You don't have that opportunity.
Yeah.
So financially, at this point in time, going through the exercise, you're going to be above what we even thought of. We can do it. We did the yard waste.
Yeah.
You got that internalized, and you'll be close there because everybody was going to take it to the same place, splish it, to the Moore County yard waste place.
Yep.
You're at, correct me if I'm wrong, $55, $56 a ton right now with your tonnage at Moore County.
For waste, yeah.
Yeah, you can't compete. You just can't compete with that.
So these bids that we've got in front of us are for what term? How long?
5 years, 5 years to 5 year mill,
Okay. So 2025 to 2030.
plus 5 year renewal if you want to.
So it'll be 5 years and a 5-year renewal option.
Yeah, option. Yep.
So what does that mean for a monthly expense for people relative to what they're paying now?
That's really a policy decision to be made by the council when we
Right.
set the fee schedule with the budget next year.
Right?
And
But right now,
quite
we're,
honestly, if this goes in place in January of 2025, when we set it next year, it's gonna be a balancing act of 6 months of one
Right,
contract, 6 months
right.
of another.
I mean,
But that's
Right.
really, we'll go back through the conversation about, are we trying to collect
are we
number
subsidizing?
50/50? Are we trying to collect? I mean, one of the things that occasionally has been, I know these guys kicked around and they hit me with last Friday, was turning this into an enterprise fund, which I think would be a very interesting exercise. But if you turn it into an enterprise fund, you're gonna try and collect 100% of what it's costing you. And then we would have the decision around whether yard waste was even part of that conversation or not. But that particular, it's even hard to take this slide
Right,
and try
right.
to do not this slide, but this.
But a
do a
comparison,
comparison because of what I said earlier, which is that your current rate was based roughly on 50/50, and it was a 50/50.
was it 50/50 or
on
64?
contract And the estimated tonnage based off on the most recent year. And
Right,
included yard waste. These figures don't include yard waste at all, so you can do some maneuvering and try to do some apples, but the bottom
Yeah.
line is that is part of your fee-setting budget discussion come next April, unless you want to talk about it way in advance of that, and that's how we build the budget around some philosophy, but that's not something easily answered today.
Didn't GFL's original bid last year have every other recycling as an option?
Every other week.
It did, every other week.
It did.
I'm still perplexed on this, but all right.
We ask.
We asked, yeah.
We asked
We've
more
asked
than
multiple
once.
times. Multiple times.
Sometimes like never. It's interesting that they went from every other to,
No, the one thing to remember is, the risk has been diverted over to your service provider. The tonnage, the processing fee, your fuel surcharge, your cap on
Which
your
is-
CPI, which is a pretty significant, and those are $25.
David's hitting the topic right there. They may have said, no, we're good with what we're doing. We know we put that in the previous bid, but now we are assuming more risk, which we had that
Oh, we
discussion
did, well,
with.
yeah.
They're assuming a lot more risk. So it may not be To them, this is not apples to apples, is what they had before. So,
You had all the risk. If tonnage went to $80 or whatever recycling, or the tonnage with fuel surcharge or CPI, we diverted it. We took it off your shoulders, put it on them.
Wonderful presentation. Thank you very much. It's a lot of effort.
Jen, what do you think is the smartest option?
I wish I was a policymaker. I'm sorry. Well, no, it's really, no, it really, it's two simple questions, if I may.
Right,
If I
go
may.
ahead, please.
Recycling, yes or no? If you want recycling, to me, it's right there. It's a tiered. If you want, if that's the lowest cost for the system and it's still providing a service. But if the question is recycling or not, I mean, that's,
I will say, the good news is all of those numbers are way better than what we had before with the bids. So regardless of what happens, we're better off. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
the last comment I will make, and I know you already know this, but time is of essence. I will go back today. I will send you.
Tonight.
I hope you do understand now why we didn't just blurt this out, because there's some good questions in there. We have the same questions. We have beat this thing for hundreds of hours,
Yep.
literally.
So when do you want an answer?
Preferably by August 8th at the latest.
Meeting or is it a work session?
Council meeting, because it falls early
That's what it is.
First is the agenda meeting. If y'all
Okay.
know on the first, that'd be great too.
Before that, that's great.
That allows them.
We can
to
do
go
it
back
on
and
agenda.
finalize the
Yeah,
contract.
can't we do that on the next,
I think we could probably do
We're
it
not
on
asking you to
agenda. Yeah.
vote, because we've got to actually put the contract together. We're just asking you to give us a direction.
give us a
as to
direction.
Who we're doing that with, and that decision is based upon.
Well, that's a big decision. I mean, it's a recycling yes or no is a big decision. Do we need to push it to the 8th to provide community an opportunity to speak at a public hearing? And that's, I guess I'm asking the council members.
I'm okay with that. Yeah, if we have it as just a public I mean, we don't have to have it as a public hearing, but
least a
maybe a
public
public
comment
public
to be-
comments maybe, just to hear. I'm open to that.
Whichever way council wants it, we could just public comment is clearly at every regular business meeting, or we can put a action item on there, or a public hearing item on there. If you want to literally do that.
I think it's important.
Let's do it.
From
Yeah, if you can
constituents.
put it as a public hearing, it's allowable by the rules, then that's fine. And then I would feel comfortable by the end of that night picking one for you on the 8th.
On the 8th?
Yeah.
Okay,
We
and
really need to make a decision that day.
For sure.
we can do that. And
If,
I have a feeling we'll all be leaning one way or the other. And then when the people show up, if anyone has a very strong opinion, we
Talk
can
to
weigh
your-
that into it.
Talk to your citizens and talk to your friends and.
I mean, Anna's going to cover this, no doubt, in the paper. So we'll start to get phone calls with input, which will be great.
I can sure tell you when trash is picked up, I get phone calls.
Yeah.
Oh,
And to all three of you, thank you so much. This is so
Nice to have you
detailed
in our
and
community.
lovely. Thank
for
you.
your presentation.
Thank
I'd
you.
like to thank David, Elizabeth, Mike certainly leading this up, James,
Absolutely.
Corey, Jessica obviously ran early numbers on this, but there's been a lot of effort go into
Yeah.
kind of getting to this stage. So.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Next thing is the Knollwood multi-use path. Is that you, Reagan? talking?
Well, James is present if there's any questions about what we're talking about here, but just as a quick reminder, council recalls that we were talking about doing a multi-use path through Knoll Road, and you looked at some various designs and things, and we sent back our desires to DOT. James did some great work in getting them to approve a budget increase for that project from what was originally estimated way back pre-COVID. Of course, as part of the project amendment, it also meant that our match was going to go up pretty significantly. So the only reason this is on your agenda this afternoon is that James is working with Tess on putting together the budget amendment for your August meeting so that we can get that fully funded when DOT comes back to us with a bill. And the only real question is whether council wishes to appropriate that against the sort of running revenue replacement spreadsheet that we're keeping for public transparency. And if you don't have an answer for that this evening, I'd ask that you certainly let us know on the 8th when we ask you to vote to transfer the money. But that's why I placed it on the agenda here, just so that we can. You've heard commentary at the podium about the website hasn't been updated and it doesn't show. And if your intent is to go ahead and attribute that to the revenue replacement. And again, if you ask me to make at least commentary as to why that may be defensible, relative to transformative or original intent of ARPA funds before it became revenue replacement. Clearly, it's parks, recreation, health related, which was one of the categories of all of that discussion. Clearly, as BJ has made the statement, at the time we were looking at the various options for the project, this does tie together two very significant portions of our Greenway Trail and really makes it possible to get from one end of town to another. So the project has a lot of positive things about it. Whether you choose to define that as transformative or not is personal choice. But again, the only purpose this evening was just to get an idea of whether you wished to include it on that spreadsheet or not. And if you had other questions about the project at this point in time, I'll turn to James and ask if he has input on those.
If it was revenue replacement, it's just basically a third of it that would be revenue replacement, since the original 236 is already
Right. It's just the amount that's being transferred.
the 181.
Yep.
Roll with it, based on what you said, and just, I mean, it sort of from a bigger picture, in addition to the original intent, is I've always sort of hoped that we would be able to do things with that money, that maybe we wouldn't have been able to, or like big things. And this is something where instead of
Thank you.
raising taxes a
You're
half
using
cent,
it to leverage
we
a
are-
lot
we're
more
gonna do
money
that.
from another source.
And this is a permanent thing. This is something that will be around. And it's connecting greenways that are across
That's the-
Southern Pines.
right.
Really affect a lot of people.
We're getting a deal on Connecticut.
Right, right.
Any other questions for James?
Does Mr. Simeon want to be heard?
Well, this is not public,
No, it's not.
sorry. I mean,
All right. Okay.
I guess, I
But
mean,
we're around if you want
since-
to talk to us after the meeting.
since we're talking about it, I mean, if you said it, I missed it, like timing wise, like what, is there an estimate for time when this would start moving?
I would like to say we would be further along already, but going back and forth and following through the process to get all the agreements approved between the town and DOT is taking longer than expected. Now we're working through the actual engineering scope. That has to be submitted and reviewed by DOT before we can actually engage the engineer. They've got to review it. Since the pot of money that DOT pulls from is federal money, they've got to make sure that every contract and step along the way is done properly. So it's taking a little bit longer.
Yeah, so, and with a nod to Mr. Simeon being present, there isn't even a formal final design. You'll remember some of the questions were around where might a left-hand turn be allowed? How will that work? We're not even to that stage because we're still working through the design, the engineer design contract documents through DOT. So,
Thank you for that.
yeah, because our intent is, once there is a design and those types of questions can be answered, to invite those individuals
comment.
living along
Great.
Mill Road and stuff back. So this is still, unfortunately, we're still earlier in the process than I think James or I would care to be, but that's where we are.
Does this stop the number from later being like, oh, since we're a year later down the road, you need more money? Is this like it, or is that never the case?
You're going to be subject to whatever the bidding environment is when a final design is completed and you go out for bid. I was just reading reports earlier this morning about, CPIs and inflation coming down, but the Fed's talking about maybe one more increase, and who knows where we will be at when this thing goes out to bid. And a lot of that will just be how many contractors are looking for this type of work when that time comes, too.
But are we subject to like 100% over a certain number, or are we subject to just the shared amount? Like a percentage of the overage? Do you know?
Well,
is there a cap on?
Right now, the current agreement between the town and DOT is a set number.
yeah.
And if we were to go over, the town would be liable for that whole amount. But there's nothing that stops us from going back to DOT and requesting another revision. that they could.
Yeah, because we would have a
consider or
bid
not.
number at least and an idea. And the other thing is that I believe the current estimate does have a contingency
Oh, yes.
built into there. So to some extent, that covers increased costs with time, depending on how much time passes.
All right, thank you.
Now our favorite topic, street parking.
No real presentation for this one either, but we've been having a lot of conversations with DOT about the Broad Street parking. You may or may not be aware, but that section of Broad Street is on DOT's list to resurface with this year's resurfacing project. So we've been talking with them, like, what would that look like? Can we get this worked in? There's no point in them going out, resurfacing the road, striping it for us to follow up a month later and say, hey, would you mind changing all the striping again? But the end result was essentially
Music.
that DOT is amenable to working with us. They've looked at it. They're okay changing the crossings. They didn't see any issues with traffic. So if this is something that the town wants to do, they're willing to work with us kind of on a handshake basis with the understanding that we would follow up with a actual formal resolution making the request. But
When would we need to do that if we're on board to try to help be like, okay, here's the resolution? Tell us when.
so, well, the resolution is okay if that follows a little bit. I was hoping to get some kind of feel for direction here tonight.
I've been favor, I think, last, I think, there's clear, we know in favor of it last meeting.
I would also offer, because there was a request about what the BPAC might think of all of this and stuff, and I know BJ attended their last meeting and kind of went over this conceptually, and I would welcome him to offer any comments from Mr. Cohn and the committee that he came across.
Paul's mic is right there, if you want it.
Except I can't remember what it was. I wrote it all in a report here and I sent it in an email, so it must be real loud here. We don't have a mic over here, do we? Do we? What fell on the chair here? All right. Is the mic picking me up? All right, great. So here's what I did. I went to the BPAC meeting on July 9th, and I spoke with them, and I did come up with a visual aid here to kind of illustrate their the points they raised. First, explained the whole scope of the project, the 2 blocks and the one-way parking, and laid it all out, and showed them these images that I'm showing you, and we used Street View. They did ask that if the traffic is one way to please paint the sharrows in the middle of the lanes instead of next to parallel parked cars. Sharrows in this location right here lead cyclists to think that this is where they should ride, and this is right in the danger zone for doors of cars opening. So they asked to put them in the middle. Due to pedestrians leaving the 45-degree parked cars, one of the things they commented on, and this was largely from John, who owns a business downtown, is very familiar with how people interact with the 45-degree parking. He said people get out of the cars, and they don't necessarily cross over to what they do is they walk along the back of the cars until they get to a crosswalk, and then they cross. So what he asked was that if these are going to be parked 45-degree angles right here, he asked that it be considered that just like there's a crosswalk right here across the railroad tracks, that another one be put in right here, because a lot of people will walk along the backs of the cars until they can then cross over if they're going to the other side of town, other side of the tracks. And if you look at the current layout of these crossings, sure enough, most of these crossings in this downtown area have 2 crossings on either side, and this one only has 1. So he asked that that be contemplated as part of the design, is providing that.
Does that involve a negotiation with the railroad?
It does involve getting crossings, yes.
And is that on a scale of 1 to 10, how difficult is that?
Not sure. We've asked 3 times, reaching out, try to get some direction from them, and we have not gotten a response yet.
I won't say the answer is always no, because clearly there's a number of them throughout the downtown, but it's not an overnight process.
And they also were interested in us closing a lot of, historically, they were interested in us closing a lot of those. So those intersections. So I don't want to create an issue.
Yeah, no, again, all we can do is ask, and I'm sure we will be on the expense for that little bit of sidewalk and such to create those crossings. And I think we determined at the last meeting, there's one that doesn't have a crosswalk on either side.
Isn't it Illinois?
And it would be important to,
Yeah.
that would I
Okay.
would suggest should be priority one if they say,
Absolutely.
pick one. But
Absolutely.
Now, it was interesting because I mentioned that, and according to the BPAC and the folks that were familiar with downtown, they said if the 45-degree parking is going to start here and run down this way, they didn't think many people at all would walk backwards or would go away from town to cross over here to then come into town. They figured they would just walk along the backs of the 45-degree parking until they got to here, and then instead of crossing here, they'd want to cross right here. So that was the feedback. You know, agree or disagree, that was that subject did come up about whether or not to put crosswalks here, because that had been a discussion at the last meeting. So that was their take on it.
I'm actually fascinated with and interested in John's take on that, BJ. But of course, he's in a different block. I certainly notice relative to the park and even across the street relative to the post office area that people tend to just jump out of their car and go across the street as opposed to, as you state, walking along and finding the crosswalk. So it might be different activity depending on the block you're on too.
So then
If we cannot paint line or put additional crosswalks over the railroad tracks, is it possible to paint the lines parallel to the tracks on Massachusetts, like where the W is?
like a
Yeah,
crosswalk
just
like this.
something painted so that people aren't walking on the street.
So I'll say all of the striping for the new parking aisles, we have to pull a drawing together, submit it to DOT. We can throw that in there, DOT can look at it, and they can give us a yay or a nay.
Is that not one that they will kick out? If I understand what you're asking, Taylor, is that not one they will kick out pretty immediately because you don't have ramp to ramp or sidewalk
Yeah,
to sidewalk?
it's a bridge to nowhere coming this direction.
Yeah.
Right.
Put in 4 feet of sidewalk easier than we can put sidewalk if they're not going to let us cross the tracks.
Get permission to at least put a landing ramp there, even if it doesn't have a crossing of the tracks sort of thing?
The other comment,
how the tracks
there were two other comments. One is that on the other side, they were wanting to clarify that if Southwest Broad Street from West Mass to West Illinois is to be made one way, please make Southeast Broad Street one way in the same 2 blocks. And I confirmed with James the next morning that wasn't part of the project scope.
Yeah.
And then the last thing was that Dan Cohn had talked about bump out crosswalks, also sometimes called curb extensions, along Southwest Broad to further enhance pedestrian safety. So now as you're coming down, like right here,
Right. I agree with that.
if you go down another block and you make it look like this, right here you would have a bulb out
Well,
that would
right.
look something like that.
Which would make it safer and also more, and it would emphasize the walkability we were working toward.
And
Yeah.
it would let people know that we encourage pedestrians.
Right. I think so. I'm for that.
Typically have traffic calming because they bottleneck a little bit.
Right.
The perceived openness of the road. They also provide less space that pedestrians are actually in the road exposed to cars because they extend the sidewalk out a little bit, and they do enhance safety, studies show a little bit.
Right.
So those were the 4 comments that
Yeah.
came from BPAC.
I agree with all that.
Good job, Dan and crowd.
Now, I will say, on the angled parking side, the new side of angled parking, DOT did require or request that we put in some curb, basically to keep people from encroaching towards the intersections. So we've got a concept of what that would cost versus, or width along the actual painting of the parking lines. I did not put a cost to putting in an island on the parallel parking side. So if that's something we're interested in, we can pull that together. It wouldn't be a large dollar item.
I'm really interested in that. And I think if you have that lattice work marking on the road, you're already underway. I mean, you have your area designated, so that would be pretty helpful, I think. Again, if we're practicing what we're preaching, which is walkability and moving people, I think as much as we can do to make that safe.
we talking about putting it in downtown, or just in this new section?
Well, there is some.
That'll be the next discussion is do we, and then a lot of that may depend upon what it costs to do one of those. But yeah,
And there are already some.
retrofitting in, and there are some,
are
and there are
some,
some
yeah.
where I could see where it would be very helpful, but they
Yeah,
don't exist
right.
currently.
No, I think
and-
it's a great move. I don't know if that was, I don't know if you were at the helm, Reagan, when that happened, but I think it was a smart move.
The
as
fact that
far
we
as-
have so many people come to town, we have a lot of tourists.
Yeah.
So when we do this, it should indicate to them that, yes, we want you to walk, but when you drive, be careful because we do encourage walking. So I think we should have it as obvious as possible that this is a walking community. You might be new, but we're here. And to slow down and let our pedestrians just cross over any place they want to. As we all know, I'm probably one of them. Not necessarily go to the crosswalk.
Clarification real quick. I know this automatically assumes the angled for, I get my directionals wrong, away from town. What is the current, if anything, other than it's going to be one way, for the Rugrats Gullies block? Is that, there's no additional striping parking at this point? It's just going to be one way? Or what's that side of the street they thinking about?
Current plan was to one-way it and then have angled parking on the track side.
Okay, so it was angled as well. Okay. I
That
didn't know.
that would net-
Lose your parking along the
Right.
curb as part of
Okay,
that.
Gotcha,
yeah.
okay.
that would net you the most amount of spaces through that block.
Got it, thank you.
I don't know, that block works pretty well with 2 lines of parallel parking as it currently is, as far as what that block gets used for. It does get tight, it's tight.
I was going to say, I don't know that it works very well.
It's
Definitely gets used as
If it's one way,
It is one way now. I mean, you have to
Right.
wait. So this would truly be one way. And make it like what it usually is.
Okay.
You've got people parking on your side. You have to wait for somebody.
well, think through angled parking with trucks that are huge. And tell me if you still feel that way, because we may have less room than we have now.
I mean, I appreciate the angled parking on the left side. It does put their trunk closer to the business, and it opens up the visibility for the business on the right side, which is nice. It wouldn't be a bad idea to go park a car out there and see how far it goes.
Yeah,
but
we're gonna really be,
It's-
borrow somebody's
Was the
giant truck.
intent to recapture the 6 feet on that block also toward the tracks that we were doing, that we had originally planned on doing at the,
that was just straight paint.
yeah. Or I think I recall the reason for choosing the track side and the angle was both maximizing the number of spaces, but also if you try to do it against the business, you've got the drives and things along there that create conflict. That even if you put the parallel parking spaces around the drives, you've got sight distance issues trying to pull out of them or into them, so.
What's the cost? I mean, I know when we did some of the early projects, we picked the cheapest ones that were just line striping.
Yeah.
If we're not ready to decide on this, because we want to measure it and see if they're like, we're ready today, if they just did the repaving, I mean, we're not talking about a huge additional cost if we decide, yep, it's a good idea.
We'll keep
That being paved,
Yeah,
correct?
that side is town side. That's not part of the
That's
DOT
ours.
project.
So we have some time to not have to hastily
Meet you out there
decide
with
what
some
to do.
masking
Yeah.
tape.
Apparently DOT has asked that if we're going to one way, the other side, that we will do this, so, but
I wanna-
But yeah, it's not part of their contractor's duty to come in there and do anything on that block.
Yeah, it needs to mirror, yeah.
Today is whether or not we want to do the one-way and, are we okay with parallel parking and angled parking on the DOT side? Because that we have to submit to them, give them a plan. It involves changing signing so that they can make that, how we stripe our portion of Broad Street, we have time to make.
And it sounds like they want a resolution to that effect.
All in favor of that
but-
one? I think
Yes.
yes. Go forth and strike.
I will pass that along and we'll follow up at the next regular session with an actual resolution.
James,
Thank you, James.
really good.
James?
Now we come to the roundtable discussion.
I'm really interested in a new sign at the Bennett Street parking lot. I am on the Bennett Street parking lot now, and it says, it's a green sign that looks like official state sign, and it doesn't really invite people to park there. So,
Kind of beautiful. I mean, when I was chair
They can make that probably public works, right?
So if it just said public parking, 24 hours free, or whatever you want to say,
Clear off the green so you can see it.
and let's give it a try. Because I think, I've mentioned that parking lot to 3 or 4 constituents, and is that what's happening? Thank you so much.
But I'm putting it in your purse.
Thank you so much, that's awesome. And they had no idea that was public parking.
Oh, I've said that for years.
So if we can make a sign, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's on, we've got some new design signs being made, but if there's something that we need to do in the interim,
Now, Jessica had a really good, I mean, a round, good-looking.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
I've
we're
seen
working
what
on
she
a
had.
design
and
that would,
So,
it definitely goes there along with a number of other places.
right. And my other,
Yeah. And
Right.
nobody knows about it.
the other thing I wondered about was the letter to the editor that caught my attention about, are we making a mistake with our electric car plugins? Are we not, I mean, I don't know.
But they're
Yeah.
not our plugins either. I think
Yeah,
that's
but we're contracting with the people who are doing them, so are we making a mistake because of a lack of knowledge on our part? I don't know the answer.
Not enough voltage.
I think the letter said that it would take so long to charge at that level charger that really people aren't going to use them, which then feels like stepping on their toes as a business. I mean, we made an agreement with them to lease the
Right.
spots, and I think that
And
we
look
can,
at the letter. I mean, I do know,
we can make a recommendation.
I do know part of those conversations back when it was all coming together was that you wouldn't necessarily be looking for the speed chargers because part of the idea is somebody comes, parks, has lunch, shops. So
Right.
the intent was not for a speed one, but if what's out there isn't even sort of
I've never
the
seen a
standard
car-
entry level,
I've never
That's
seen
a
a car
problem.
charging there. Of course, I think you pay to charge there and you go down the street a block and you don't pay. So,
well, and again, if you're not finding the lot, you're not finding the chargers
right,
either.
there are a number of problems here.
Let's follow up with the company. Yeah.
Did we just miss the mark?
Right, and that, yeah, and maybe we did, and
Maybe that guy's missing the
then
mark.
it's time to say we made a mistake and fix it if we can, but,
That guy can up his.
yeah.
If it's as bad as that letter was insinuating, nobody's going to use this service, and he's going to quickly be like, all
out of
right,
business.
this isn't working, I'm
Right,
out of here.
right.
Then we'll be like, take your
So
equipment and go home.
kudos to the pilot with the letter to the editor that we're all reading, so thank you for that. But that, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, I'm, yeah, I'm just on the parking lot. The parking lot's my new mission in life, yeah.
Good luck, because I've been doing it for years.
No, I think a sign's gonna make all the difference in the world. I think it'll really be great. And welcome, free parking.
I have a few things. I can't remember the last time we spoke about the skate park, so I wanted to follow up that I did talk to Jeff Morgan on the Pinehurst Council that the skate park would be approaching him. I sent our letter that we approved over to Nick Pacerno, and he's going to see if the county can do anything. And I've talked to Neil Jackson's office and Tom McGinnis. And I think they're going to present to Aberdeen with a formal request in August.
Great.
The last Sand Hills Area MPO meeting, not all the towns had designated their TAC representatives, so they're meeting again in August to make those official designations and move forward. I think Pinehurst is putting together a draft MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, is that right? Okay. And then we'll bring that back to the councils to everyone vote on it, including, or for us to agree to in voting structure, and then establish the TCC, which is essentially the staff version of the MPO. Does that make sense? All right, cool. There are so many acronyms. Yeah. Yep. Bill and I both got a comment from someone about the Knollwood Road work, and I went online, and there's limited information about when it's getting updated, when the road's gonna be finished.
Yeah, so
And if it's
if y'all
temporary,
can
if it's
just put
permanent.
together like a statement, here's what's happening, here's when the repaving is gonna happen, here's our time frame, because there's just a lot of confusion. Like, are they gonna pave that whole thing in there? Yes.
Exactly.
I just, if it could be, I know that some communication is probably going out, but
Well, and it's like there's
More.
some information online on the main landing page. I looked for a timeline that would make sense to include all of that Knollwood work, and I just didn't see it. So I think
Andy,
just review it and update it.
They didn't have a repaving date, it's probably because we don't have it yet necessarily.
Okay.
I'm gonna look to James and see if he has a.
or even,
There was one that was last week as the date.
yeah,
Yep.
Okay. The last we heard is they're probably talking about 6 weeks out before the
Okay.
actual water line work
Is done.
completed.
Okay.
But that's also them being a little bit optimistic.
If anyone that's listening, he said 6 weeks out, is being optimistic on the water line work being done.
And I guess the other question is like, have
But we're going to try to get information online,
the
right?
type of repaving, because I guess they've done some patch work here and there, and the understanding that that's not the final thing, it's going to be the whole
There's
road,
just
and it's going to be
confusion.
nice, so there's a lot of.
Clarified.
Yeah.
Because, and, you know, that's how I get to town.
Yeah, I had gotten that text probably 6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Because there was a rumor going that it was just gonna be that patch
Yeah.
job. No, and
Part of the intent in ultimately choosing that alignment was to line it up with a road that we knew needed to be redone anyhow, and we didn't want to go in and do the road and then tear it up for a utility line and those, so it was really an effort by Corey and James to try to lay multiple projects on top of one another and spend money once, so.
The last thing, well, one of the last things on my list was, so if I recall correctly, we put in the faux brickwork for walkways downtown before the last US Open.
The stamped concrete. I don't
Yes.
remember if it was the last, I don't remember the timing relative to the US Open, but yes, we did put that in.
Oh, is there going to be a conversation at our level about any preparations for the US Open for Southern Pines? Are there things that we need to be doing or thinking of? You don't need to answer that now. I just felt like it's a big deal and there's a lot of people coming to town and maybe it needs to be discussed.
I think last time we did, I had that golf ball project. You know,
Oh,
golf ball,
yeah.
that was
I do remember the golf
Rotary.
balls.
That
Yeah.
was Rotary with the
was
downtown
Rotary.
art product,
But I'm almost
project, yeah.
positive that the road stamping, the sidewalk stamping was the same
That
thing.
was, no, that was before
Have,
that.
it wasn't the, yeah, that project wasn't tied to the fact that the Open was coming to town, but it may have happened around the same time.
Well, the first part was, that's when I was chairman of the Appearance Commissions. That's been a while.
It's been a
And-
while,
And we did
yeah.
it. And then we added, did we add some more? It had nothing to do with the Open. We just.
Well, we tried to add some more, but there was always the ongoing issue with DOT in
Yeah,
Pennsylvania.
it was
Um,
well before that.
Okay.
It needs to be kind of brightened up, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
touched up.
It needs a little refurbishing.
Well, whether or not we need to spend town money and resources doing projects, I think that we need to be discussing the fact that 100,000 people are going to be visiting Moore County
And the
next
cameras are
spring.
coming.
Yes. So at some point to have that conversation. And then I met with the business investment group called Par Excellence today about a couple business ideas, and I tried to encourage them for public transportation. I feel like I pushed that, and I just told them I would mention it to you guys today. That was all.
I have something, sorry to lengthen the meeting. Don't need an answer on this. It's just something I've kind of struggled with, even back to my planning board days, that's been highlighted recently. And it's the order that we present things when a new project comes to us at our business meetings. Because now, you know, BJ or whoever else says, here's the deal, they summarize their spiel, and then the project applicant speaks. And in a recent case, BJ does an excellent job like he does, and then the applicant's like, ditto what BJ said, and then they sit down. It kind of creates a little bit of, oh, the town is selling it. The town's neutral. I mean, BJ's just interpreting the rules. Think about it. I would almost like, you applicants, sell me on this. Tell me about your thing. What are you doing? And then have town staff come behind that. I just think it's perceived a little bit better because several times people think that DJ or whoever else is like petitioning us to approve something, when all they're doing is just giving us like the landscape of the plan. And I'd rather the applicant, I don't know, I think it may be received better or not perceived that staff is doing, and I may be the only one. I've just sort
No,
of gotten
you're
that
here.
feeling
I'm with
lately.
you. I'm with you.
Just difference in order of how y'all get up and speak. If you follow them instead of be the first person. But don't need an answer today, just something that
Interesting.
has come to mind recently. I'm like, just wanted to bring it up.
Okay.
Because I remember being back planning board, Chris Kennedy would do it, and people were like, he's just pushing all these projects and in favor
Right,
of them and
right.
signed it. And no, that's not what he was doing. But when that's the first person, it sort of creates that perception. So something to think about.
So Mac has a response, it looks like.
Or is that not legal?
Reasons the staff goes first is so that you lay out the facts. If you let the applicant go first and theirs is a sales pitch, then the staff is put in the very uncomfortable position of disagreeing with things that they have said. But if the staff lays out the facts first, then the sales pitch, y'all know it's a sales pitch and everybody knows it's a sales pitch and the staff isn't in the position of having to correct the facts.
And is that standard? I mean, I hate where it appears.
I've seen
that-
it done both ways. Mac's absolutely correct, and the pros is that it is an opportunity to lay out the facts. It's also an opportunity to sort of highlight the staff report and in particular provide where there are deficiencies and/or deviations and/or things that need to be further clarified. It's an opportunity for staff to kind of provide that to the council so that when the applicant is in front of you, you kind of have some things to ask beyond what you've already put together from the packet review. But it is always a challenge for exactly the reason that you state too. So I've seen it done both ways, and there's pros and cons either direction.
With Bill regarding the perception, that's been feedback, right? But I understand what you're saying. I understand what Mac's saying.
I gotta go lean with my legal counsel.
That's the way it's been. So there
Right.
clearly was a reason for it. It was just sitting, just,
Really important we be aware of that, though. I agree with you. Yeah.
y'all do too good a job. You're too thorough.
This is not a sales pitch. This is the town just presenting the facts. So the town has no position. This is saying A, B, C, and D. This is it.
9 times out of 10, unless there's like hot off the press update or something, which does occur with some of these, particularly when they're continuations and people are trying to work through things between meetings. But 9 times out of 10, most of the staff's questions or recommendations are contained in that staff report. So if you prepare yourself coming in, now, again, that doesn't necessarily mean anybody in the audience understand. Yeah, it's,
But I think maybe just a clarification that that he's not trying to sell you on anything. This is just the facts. This is the presentation. It's just the town presentation.
and a relative recent change, there is a recommendation now from the planning staff, which is a little different than historically, so,
Which I also appreciate.
yeah. But
That's
that in
really
and of
helpful,
itself,
but it
for
do-
some
does-
people,
Right,
if you're coming in a meeting against a project and it's being recommended for approval, there's
right.
going to be some angst.
It's a step forward, too. Right, I understand.
Okay. Y'all talk about, y'all working.
offering is to suggest one way is better than the other. It's
Right.
just there are
I know,
pros
I
and
agree.
cons.
There are pros and cons.
Definitely.
I mean, I think that maybe when we have public hearings, we just need to consider the presentation of it. Maybe it is public comment first, and then BJ introduces himself very clearly as staff, and then introduces the applicant to come up and,
Maybe it's
yeah,
public
I don't
comment.
know.
Maybe that's a good solution. What's the disadvantage of public comment first?
I guess they wouldn't have heard anything. I mean,
Yeah, they would
But-
know all the facts. And by the time they hear this, then they'll have their questions are answered.
Yeah.
Right now, they're just saying what they think, and a lot of times, as we know, they don't understand. They don't really know.
gives the applicant things to
Address.
mention, yeah.
Right,
Then
maybe.
the applicant, once he presents, the applicant can sit there and say, well, no, I think X, Y, and Z.
the only thing, I guess our most recent one showed me with that is, when we interject, it lengthens it out and takes a while. I mean, should we just be like, we're not going to interject, let BJ go, applicant go, public comment, and then we like come in and hit everybody? Because last time that was perceived as, oh, you're just forwarding BJ's recommendation and tweaking the deal you already are going to go for or not go for, which wasn't the case at all, but it was perceived that way. So maybe that's a tweak we can
Someone
make.
perceived that we had already made up our mind before it was ever presented to us, which I let them know.
You were entering into a negotiation or back and forth on details prior to
Right.
others having an opportunity. And a lot of that comes down to, and this is not meant as a slight, because we had this conversation, but it's up to the chair to kind of direct those sorts of things, particularly outside of a quasi-judicial setting. I mean, if you're chaired, I have worked with previous mayors who, for any one particular application in front of them, might choose to bring the applicant forward or bring the opposition forward just based on maybe their preconceived notion of where they were going to land on the project. I mean, there is a lot of flexibility to the chair to sort of direct those conversations. Now, I think it's very positive, don't hear me wrong. I think it's very positive to have a standard protocol that kind of sets the expectations for everybody in the room, but there is a lot of flexibility in that too. If for some reason sitting in an agenda meeting, the board says, on this particular application, I'd like to hear from X, and X might be staff, X might be applicant.
We can do
I think you can talk to to the mayor who's chairing that meeting and decide to do that. I don't, and Mac, correct me whenever I've stepped on myself here, but I don't think there's again, outside of your quasi-judicial types of procedures, I don't think there is a statutory requirement that you go in any particular order.
Okay, good to know. All right, anything else?
Good insight,
thank you.
yeah.
All righty. Now we're going to be moving into our closed session.
Well, I would make a motion, we move to a bathroom break before we do
I
that.
second that.
But,
Motion to move into closed session so that we can get things shut down.
Okay.
Again, just for those in streaming land, there will be no request for any sort of council action following the closed session. We'll simply leave the closed session and look to move to adjourn
Okay.
because the recording
So-
will end.
so I would make a motion, we move to closed session.
Second.
All right, and with that, we'll take a 5-minute break.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anna.
See if I can stand up.